cockroaches tend to be misunderstood, right? We want to kind of break that particular stigma, so we actually name it after some pop culture. I'm Foo Mao Sheng, right? I'm actually one of the curators from the Chian Natural History Museum in National University of Singapore. Right, so one of the hobbies that I like to do is basically to go around identifying all the different kinds of insects that we have all around us, right? Not just in our homes, but also in our forests, or maybe sometimes in our mangroves or near the sea. Me being a curator as well as a researcher in the museum, right? So what I do is actually go to different areas, not just in Singapore, but also in Southeast Asia, right? To find out what is the biodiversity of insects that are out there, right? To see whether is there any, how common some insects are, or see which ones are the endangered ones or even the rare ones. When I first got interested in insects, I would say I was actually in kindergarten school, right? So that was a time when I know kids are fascinated by animals, right? So I will actually be fascinated by some of the creepy crawlies or some of the bugs that are found in the bushes or on the grass or the tree. So that is actually when they start to spark off, and then it got in a way involved in primary school. Right, so there's this Young Scientist Award. So one of the awards is actually the Young Entomologist, right? So the young scientist who studies insects. So from there, I started my own project to go about, let's say, finding all the different kinds of insects that might be out there. When I was an undergrad, so getting to know, oh yeah, maybe there is actually potentially you can become a researcher. So it's because it's a topic that, or say a subject that is not really say taught in school. So most of it is actually come through self-learning. Yeah, so I attended some online courses, go through different kind of books to find out more about, let's say, the different insects, as well as how you identify the different ones. So from there, it actually evolved, and then I got into becoming a research assistant into one of the labs, and that's where I guess in a way things got my career progression. Right, then that's how I actually ended up in the museum. Usually, maybe scientists will actually go out in the forest, like our nature reserve, to find them. But sometimes I also would like to explore, it's like inside the urban areas, like see which kind of insects could have actually moved from like the forest to our human areas, or say in a way adapt to our human areas also. Right? So because of adaptation-wise, we know that insects actually could actually evolve much more faster than other animals. Yeah, most people always tend to lump insects together as one. Right, for example, they say, oh, a certain fly, everything's all a housefly. Right, but there's actually different kinds of houseflies. Some are good, some of them are pests. Right, so but the thing is that there's not much, say, awareness of knowing which are the different kind of houseflies that we have, right, or the different kind of insects, and getting to know which ones are the good and which ones are the bad. Yeah, so those are the ones that still need to be to raise awareness or to be educated on also. So when it comes to cockroaches, usually people always think it's the American cockroach, right? So they always know American cockroaches are always at your dumpster, your rubbish bin, right? They are vectors of diseases, right? People who are also allergic to it. So the word cockroaches really gives a very bad name to all kinds of cockroaches. But there is, like, say, those are the urban cockroaches, and then there's other in the forest also. So those are different ones. Right, so the urban ones, those are the pests, right? So like say your American, your German cockroaches, right? Those are the ones that we can get rid of, right? Those are the pest control where they are supposed to come in and clear them out. But when it comes to the forest cockroaches, those are actually the good ones, right? They are very useful in the ecosystem, right? They do play a part in having to do the carbon cycle or the nitrogen cycle. At the same time, right, they also sometimes could also be pollinators of flowers also. So I was doing my whole survey and then finding out, this particular insect, they're looking so very different, right? It's unlike the other kind of cockroaches that I've seen so far. So I thought, okay, yeah, maybe this one could be something new. But whether is it new to science, that one was still up in the air. So it's only after a few times, with the help of my students, we do the molecular work, right, and we do the photography. It got hold of one of my fellow scientists from the Philippines, and he found out, hey, this one could be something very new. So we do some collaboration, right? We do some exchanges of information, and we found out that, hey, yeah, this cockroach is actually a totally new species of cockroach. But it's very similar to the ones that we find in Borneo, but on the inner parts of it itself, right, the genitalia, we found out that it's actually completely different. In one way, also, I guess, because it's a cockroach, right? Some of the commenters I have seen so far, they were like, they are a bit shocked, or say very surprised to see that there are actually new cockroaches to be found in Singapore, right? But this cockroach actually has been around for a very long time. Right? We also name it as under the Pokemon Feromosa, right? It's because me and my fellow scientists, we want to say change the perspective with regards to cockroaches, right? Because seeing that cockroaches tend to be misunderstood, right? We want to kind of break that particular stigma, so we actually name it after some pop culture. Yeah, us being Singaporeans, we like to eat, right? At the same time, also is that when I study insects, also at the same, it kind of like combines of both worlds. So it's like I'm eating what I like. Yeah. So actually from there, I get to find out more, saying that how farming of insects, right, is actually much more, say, less consuming, right, or less taxing on the earth resources compared to, like, say, if you are farming cows or you're farming chickens or even pigs. So in the future, right, human population is going to increase, year by year, right? So like last year, we eat up to 8 billion people on the planet already. So by 2050, we can kind of expect that there's not enough land to grow our normal kind of agriculture, like your cows, chickens, and pigs. So how am I going to get my, say, some of my other food sources, right? Because with more demand, right, some of the prices are also going to increase. So definitely we have to look for some alternative sources, right? So although there is also, say, lab-based meat, right, those might be, say, not feasible in the next few years. Maybe it will take a few years down the road before it comes into the supermarket. So the next feasible one is actually looking at edible insects, because this is something that is common in some of our neighboring countries like Cambodia or Thailand. Yeah. So I thought, okay, maybe try it out. And then from there, I find out it's actually not as bad as what we think it is. Right? Usually when it comes to food, you see something that's appealing, right, you find it is nice. But when it's some food that is, say, not appealing to you, right, then you find it, it could be disgusting. But when it comes to insects also, yes, it does have that certain appeal that will put people off. But if you try it out, it's actually not as bad as a person may think it is. I started off, trying to show, like, okay, let me try all the different kind of insects first, right? Because it's something that is very novel, especially in the Singapore society. So we get to know, okay, which kind of insects will actually have a good taste and which one have maybe a much more less appealing taste, right? Like, say, between your chicken or say your kailan and go all the way to bitter gourd, for example. So from that whole spectrum, I get to see, which ones are actually much more closer to what we have eaten. So looking at crickets, right, I can share your crickets will actually taste like eating peanut butter or, say, almond nuts. But if you were to eat, like, say, something more, say, like the water bug, right, maybe it has a bitter taste to it, right? So it's a bit like bitter gourd in some sense. Or certain times when certain other insects you try, you may feel like, I'm like eating like some very crispy bakwa. Yeah. And of course, when it comes to insects, so there will be some of them that are venomous. Right, say your scorpions, your centipede, or your tarantula. Right, usually when it comes to these kind of animals, people always say, hey, have to be wary because they have poison in them. Right, but yes, they are actually venomous, not poisonous. Right, the poison in them will actually be degraded by the heat. And you have to try it out yourself. Right, they actually taste more meaty compared to the other insects. So a good example usually comes to tarantula. Right, they will taste like crab, like your chili crab, black pepper crab. So I think how to go about that, doing a soft approach, is actually try to incorporate them into our food. Right, so you don't see the insects as a whole, but you see them as like a powder form. Yeah, so that's where I kind of like test and trial. Right, I have to put them into cakes, into cookies, so that people are saying, oh yeah, this looks like a normal chocolate chip cookie, but you taste it out, it's actually a bit more crunchier because maybe there's some insects inside. Yeah, so it's a soft approach, and that's actually how I try to overcome it. But usually the main overcome barrier is the one that people always feel that you see insects, I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to eat it because it's going to be disgusting, right? But it's trying to break the barrier and then get people to say, hey, you try it out, it's actually not as bad. I think crickets will be the one that is actually in a way the most popular one, right? At least the most well-known, they say, in regards to the consumption of them, right? So crickets are the ones. But other insects itself, maybe people might be a bit more hesitant at first sight. But in the world, we actually have about 1,900 species of insects to be eaten, right? But Singapore is only approving 16 at this point in time. So crickets will be the first step, right? Then maybe they go on to, say, the mealworms, right? But these are actually in a way very common, right? Usually, I say for crickets, people will actually tend to use it to feed their aquarium fishes or the mealworms, right? Students in primary schools will study about the life cycle of insects. Yeah, so those will be the ones that people can relate to, and then that's where they actually can first try it out. because they are slightly crunchy, right? Also easier to chew. More people are now aware, but I think it's still the next step is basically to try them out. Yeah, so it's something that will need to be up and coming soon, right? Especially with food prices starting to increase, right? Say for people who, for example, for those like say those gym rats, right, bodybuilders, right? If they want to get their whey protein, they actually know that it's actually increasing price all over the years already. So they do need to have an alternative sources also. So possibly they can actually go for say insect protein powder, right? That's just one thing. At the same time also, with culture, when it comes to our chai fan, right, or say nasi padang, right? Usually we tend to see our food tends to be a bit more carbohydrate based, right? But we also do know that protein is also part of our body system that needs in order to keep going. So having to have to cut down on your protein sizes is actually not very good. So why not incorporate them into our food also? So I think one way is actually slowly people start to ease into it is I think we'll have to get into the flow, right? To try it out first, then slowly, and it will become a norm maybe in the future, but maybe not in the next 2-3 years, but maybe 5, 6, 7 years down the road. When it comes to insects in general, I would say is if you encounter an insect itself, right? Don't be so quick to be fearful of it. Right? Because usually most of the time when it comes to the fear, it's always people think has been nurtured in you, it's a learned behavior. I mean, take a step back, right, to know, okay, ask yourself, is this insect actually dangerous to you, or is this a friend to you also, right? Because you never know, some of the insects that actually could be a friend to you, let's say helping you to pollinate your flowers in your garden, right? So that's the one thing. So always get to know that, don't be quick to stigmatize some of the insects that you have encountered. That is the main thing I would like to get people to know, that insects are actually more than just pests, right? They are actually one of the most specious groups on the planet, right? There's so many different kinds of insects, and then there's a lot more discoveries that can be made in the future.